Welcome to our presentation on dimensional accounting with Sage 300. Dimensional accounting provides a highly granular view of your finances without an unmanageable chart of accounts. Account segments are replaced with dimensions. Rules are put in place to ensure that dimension combinations used make sense, and multidimensional analytics provides flexible analysis and reporting at any level. This is best illustrated with an example. We have a training company which needs to analyze their revenue and expenses by 7 natural accounts, so this would include course fees and then various costs like catering, facilities, marketing, training costs for the trainers, travel and venue hire. We've got 2 divisions, so this would be, in this case, it's a computer company selling computer courses, so the 2 divisions are cloud and on-premises. We've got 4 regions, east, west, north and south. 8 locations, each location being a hotel where these courses are held. 5 course categories covering different operating systems and the like. 5 trainers who specialize in different areas. 5 buyers who are responsible for sourcing what is needed to run these courses. And 250 courses for the year. And so that makes it around about 5 courses a week, with each trainer delivering 1 course per week. Now, each one of these effectively is a dimension. The more traditional way would have been to use account segments over here. And the various accounts that we are required, just looking at the number of accounts, if we were to use segments here, we'd need the 7 natural accounts. We'd need 2 divisions, so the total number of permutations there now becomes 7 times 2, which is 14. Now, if we add in 4 regions, we get 56. We then add in 8 locations. We add in the 5 categories. We add in the 5 trainers and the 5 buyers. Very quickly, we see it multiplying up to, in this case, 56,000 different accounts. Now, if we were to hold this information at the individual course level as well, it would then push it up to a staggering 14 million accounts per year. Clearly quite unmanageable. So the alternative here is to use dimensional accounting, which provides a highly granular view of your finances without an unmanageable chart of accounts. In this instance, instead of the 14 million accounts a year, we'll now have 7 accounts and 6 dimensions or optional fields. Why don't we just use Sage 300's optional fields, you may ask? Well, there's a very real difficulty around data entry of optional fields. It's hard maintaining the integrity of the data. You may end up with permutations of dimensions which just don't make sense. You can't budget at this detailed level, and you're unable to easily analyze and report by dimension. We'll use 4 ORCID modules, Extender, Info Explorer, Optional Tables, and Data Views to overcome these problems or these issues. First of all, we'll use Sage 300 for the optional fields to effectively add dimension tags. We'll use Extender to simplify data entry, to enforce business rules and validation around dimensions, to hold additional financial and non-financial information by dimension. We'll use Info Explorer to analyze and budget by dimension or any combination of dimensions, and to use the write back feature to write dimension budgets back into Sage 300. We'll use the optional tables module to create multi-dimensional data structures within Sage 300 for budgeting. And we'll budget in Excel and use the add-in to write back data into Sage 300. Lastly, we'll use data views to simplify reporting of Sage 300 optional fields. Now this we can achieve in 8 easy steps. The first step will be to enter the GL accounts. The next step will be to enter the dimensions, which are effectively your Sage 300 optional fields. The third step is to create an Extender custom table to hold course information. So this would hold your default dimensions per course, along with non-financial data that needs to be kept track of. Step 4 is to flatten the optional fields and turn them into columns to facilitate reporting. We then capture the budget data. We import Extender screen scripts for data entry screens to make data entry a whole lot easier. And we then adapt Sage 300 to meet the business requirements, and we start entering the data. The adapting here would include making sure that we've got adequate validation to ensure we only end up with valid combinations of dimensions. And lastly, we'd create the actual analysis cubes and reports to be able to report either at a summary or a very detailed level, all from within the general ledger. Step 1, entering our accounts. We just need these accounts, these 7 accounts: course fees, catering, facilities, marketing, trainer costs, travel, and venue hire, and they would just be entered into Sage in the normal way. Step 2 is to enter the optional fields or dimensions, and here we're entering the buyers, the courses, the types of courses or course categories, the divisions, locations, regions, and trainers. The next step in Extender is to create a custom table to hold the course information. The screen on the left shows us how that table is created within Extender, and to the right, the screen that people would be able to use to key that information in. You can, of course, file import that data as well if that's easier. And here we're holding some default dimension data, like the location for a particular course, in this case course number 001, the trainer, division, course type, and region. And we've then got some non-financial data, including the budget number of attendees, the actual number of attendees, and the average net promoter score, all of which can be used for further analysis down the track. Step 4 is then to flatten your optional fields and turn them into columns to facilitate reporting. Now, those of you who have created reports against Sage's optional fields will know how tricky it is with the use of sub-reports and the like. So what we can do here with the data views module is change that and allow us to then treat these optional fields or dimensions just as standard columns to facilitate reporting and make it much quicker. So here we're seeing the result of that flattening in Microsoft SQL Server, in Crystal Reports, and also in Info Explorer. The next step is to actually put your budgeted information into Sage 300 at the level you require. What we've got in the top left-hand corner is the data entry screen, should we want to enter that manually. So we can, in this case, it's GL revenue account number 4300, and the course ID is C001, and we're entering an expected revenue figure of 21,000. We could be doing that instead of entering it in this fashion or importing it the standard Sage 300 way. We could be using an Excel spreadsheet and the included add-in with optional tables, which lets you then write directly back from the spreadsheet directly through into the budget set area using the formula that's highlighted there. We could also use Info Explorer and Info Explorer's write-back capability. So here what you're able to do in the same environment that you're analyzing this information, you're actually able to budget as well and write that information back into Sage 300 for analysis and reporting purposes. The next step is to make sure that data input is as easy as possible. And traditionally, entering optional fields can be tricky. It involves a number of mouse clicks and the like. And with Extender, what we can do is turn these optional fields into standard columns in the grid. So in this example over here, what we have is a course and a buyer that needs to be entered. We're looking at the standard accounts payable invoice entry screen. And based on that information, the remaining dimensions get defaulted automatically. So in this case, the course type has defaulted through as being Mac. The division is on premises. The trainer is Steve. The region is the North region, and the location has been defaulted through as well. In this case, the company had decided that it would stay fixed to not allow the override of those defaulted dimensions, but of course you could make those editable as well, depending on the exact requirements. And lastly, what we need to do is create the cubes required and reports required to analyze this multi-dimensional data that we now have. In the top right-hand corner, we have the information at a very detailed level. It's at the course level. We've got actual and budgeted amounts. We've got actual attendees. We've got the budgeted number of attendees, along with the Net Promoter Score that was allocated by the attendees to that particular course. We can also analyze, slice and dice the data. In the bottom left-hand corner, we're looking at the cloud division, and under the cloud division, we've got AWS and Azure. And within that, we've summarized the information up. So there are a number of courses sitting in there, and we're able to see the actual versus budgeted amounts. We can also graph similar information, and all of this can be achieved through Info Explorer, but certainly other analysis tools can be used as well for the purpose of this. But what we might do now is jump into Sage 300 and just see some of this happening in action. The first few steps that we need to take are very standard. We'd be creating accounts, we'd be creating optional fields and dimensions. To do that, initially in the general ledger, we would be going through to GL accounts, to accounts again, and that's where you'd be entering your accounts, your revenue account and your expense accounts. We'd then need to go through to common services, and in common services we'd go through to optional fields where we'd be entering our optional fields or dimensions, and we would then go to the setup area of each subledger where you want dimensions to operate, and you'd be attaching them to the various transaction types, bearing in mind that these dimensions can move through from one module through to another. So you might start off in accounts payable, and I'll show that to you now, where we're entering an invoice, and we'll be choosing a course along with other associated dimension information, and that will then flow through seamlessly to the general ledger for reporting. You'd probably want to do the same thing for accounts receivable for all your revenue, once again flowing through to the general ledger. The next step you'd want to do is step number 3, and that is to create an Extender custom table to hold additional course information. In order to do that, you'd go to Setup, and from there to Custom Tables. In the Custom Tables screen, you would then key in the fields that you want, and we'd need a number of fields for the different dimensions associated with each course, along with other non-financial data, which here includes budgeted attendees, actual attendees, and the average Net Promoter Score. We can import data into this table now using the standard import functionality, or we can use the table editor. And I'll pull up the table editor, pick up the first course, and there we can see course number 1, the location, trainer, division, the non-financial data, including the attendees and net promoter score. So a number of ways we can actually populate this information and keep it up to date. The next step is to flatten our optional fields to make reporting more simple. Reporting using optional fields can require the need for sub-reports and very complex SQL queries, and this ability to take the standard optional fields and turn them into columns makes for much easier and much faster reporting. That is then presented to the report writer as a data view, so the work is all being done at the database level, ensuring that everything runs as quickly as possible and as simply as possible too. So what we'll do here is go into Information Manager. We'll go to the setup area. I'll go into InfoSet codes, and we've already created one here called GPDIM. So this is to make the reporting around the GL post area, where all the posted GL transactions are, more accessible, easier to report on. So what you'd need to do is enter a name for this particular information set. You would choose whereabouts you need it to operate. And in our case, the GL post file is where this or table is where this information is held. So we're specifying that. We then go through to the database view area, where a database view will be created for you with the SQL that Information Manager is now generating. So this is all part of the data views module that I was talking about earlier on. Having generated the SQL, it's just a case of clicking Create View over here, and that view is then established within the database for your report writers to use. And if we were, for example, to look at that in Microsoft SQL Server, here we are with the various databases. We're working with DemDat. If we go into the views area, we've got that particular view. And if we look at the columns behind that view, we'll see that we've now got all those optional fields or dimensions as columns. We've got the course, course category, division, location, trainer, and region. Now, having put all of that in place, the next step would be to make sure that data entry is as simple as possible and that we've got all the validations we need in place to ensure we don't end up with combinations of dimensions which don't make any sense. So what we'll be doing is importing a number of extender scripts to achieve this aim for us, and I'll show one of those to you now on the accounts payable invoice entry side. So what we'll do is go through to AP transactions, invoice entry, and what we'll do is go off and create a new invoice. So we'll call this invoice for course. And we'll choose a catering vendor. We'll give it a document number, invoice number, a document total, and we've got the catering account has flowed through for us already. But now what we can do, what Extender has done for us, is it's turned a number of our dimensions or optional fields into columns to make data entry a whole lot easier. We've got some additional rules around the course where once we've chosen the course, it then knows what other dimensions to use. So when I choose the course, you can see the course type, location, division, and trainer are all pre-populated for me. And all I need to do now is choose the buyer. So once this invoice posts in the subsidiary ledger and accounts payable, it will all flow up into the general ledger to allow for analysis at the general ledger level. Moving on then to that data analysis, let's switch over to Info Explorer. Now, Info Explorer is a BI tool, great for slicing and dicing many dimensions, and has some great features like being able to drill back into Sage 300, and I'll show that to you in a minute. There are a number of other tools out there, so if you're already using something else, then you can more than likely continue to use just that. But to give you an idea, here we can have graphs. We've got a graph here of actual versus budget by course type. We've got course locations, the hotels where these courses are being run at. At the bottom here, we've got an analysis of our income statement by region at the top here. So we've got cloud and on-premises, and then under that we've got revenue types: AWS, Azure, Linux, Mac, and Windows. And below that, as rows, we've got our revenue and related expenses. If we want to look at things in more detail, here we've got course details, and here we can drill right into individual courses to see exactly what amounts are there, what actual revenue, budgeted revenue, actual and budgeted attendees, net promoter scores and the like. And here we've got another one which is more focused specifically on net promoter scores by course over here, or if we decided to look at the summary information, we'd get the average net promoter score then for a range of courses that have been held. But moving into have a look at something more financial, here we're looking at actual and budgeted figures by division, and we can then drill into successive layers of detail. We can go down to course type, we can go down to the actual underlying accounts. We can pull in other dimensions as well. So if we wanted to pull a trainer in here, for example, we could do just that. And we could then see exactly how we're going by trainer instead. We can then drill into that. So if we want to see how this trainer bill is going, if we drill in, we can see how he's going in terms of the different divisions he's working for, the different courses he's giving, and we can then see the more detailed information around the revenue he's generating and the associated expenses. If we no longer want to see him, we can take him out again. And similarly, we might not want to see information at perhaps the course type level, or we might want to pull something else down. So hopefully what I've shown you here is how we can slice and dice this data. And the one thing I do need to still show you is once again how we can then drill into the underlying accounts. And there, because I'm already logged in, I didn't have to put in my Sage 300 credentials, but I can then get through to the actual underlying Sage 300 accounts should I want more information. In summary then, we've been through the 8 easy steps to get up and running with dimensional accounting. We've had a look at what is involved with keeping dimensional accounting running in terms of data input, in terms of budget information and getting that into Sage 300, and in terms of analyzing and slicing and dicing your dimensional information, both from an actual and a budget perspective. Be sure to have a look at our website, www.orchid.systems, where we list in much more detail the capabilities of these modules that I've run through with you today. And be sure to have a read of our latest blog, which is about dimensional accounting. Moving on to our Q&A section now. We've got a number of questions here, so I might jump straight into it. And what I'll do is just make Anne the presenter. So Anne, if you're there, I'll switch over to you.
Thanks, Steve. You should be able to see my Sage 300 desktop.
Yes, we can see that now, so all good. And what I'll do is kick off with the first question. So the first question is, how does the GL Financial Reporter fit into all of this?
Okay, so the GL Financial Reporter allows you, either using FRView in the Statement Designer or print financial statements. One of the formulas allows you to split out the amount in a GL account either by a specific optional field or expand it to all the optional fields, split it out to the optional field values. So in our scenario, you could do a financial report, you could do an income statement really by course or by trainer or any combination of those that you're looking for. And then if you want to bring a budget into that, the resulting report, if you didn't want to use Info Explorer for your actual versus budget, using the Excel add-in. So I'm just launching the Excel add-in, and in a similar way to the Financial Reporter, it opens up in Excel, and you need to allow the ActiveX to open up. And at this stage, we can only support 32-bit Excel. There is a task later in the year to upgrade this add-in, which allows you to read info from Sage 300 into your spreadsheet, or write info from your spreadsheet back into Sage 300. So we will be upgrading that to 64-bit, but at the moment you need 32-bit Excel. And you can use, what this add-in allows you to do is to edit in formulas or use the wizard to add in formulas. If I just look at this formula in a little bit more detail, so what this is going to do, EB is the two-letter code for Information Manager, just like Financial Reporter is FR. So it's going to take the value in C3 and either read or write into the optional field called Bud Value, the info set called Course Bud, using the course, the account, and then the course, which is sitting in A3, and then these are the dates, the date, fiscal year, fiscal period. So if you can imagine this was your FR spreadsheet and it was showing you the income statement for course 1, you'd be able to edit in a formula which allows you to read the budget for course 1. There's no functions like year to date or last year or those sorts of things, but if you need to provide the specific date that you entered the budget in, and it will return that value. And these formulas can be embedded in your FR print statement, report, I forget what they call it, the selection code, where you define the formulas, and you use / to bring or / to bring those down onto the rows that are generated. So you can use these embedded in that formula area, specification area, and FR will expand them down. So FR will create your report with the actuals in, then you need to open it in the Excel add-in from optional tables and go read to get the information in. So it's a two-step process, but you can get your actual versus budget using FR and Excel.
Good. Okay, thanks, Anne. Next question, this time from Corey, is do you have a timeline on when Info Explorer will move to 64-bit?
Yes, it's on our immediate list. So I would say in the next 2 months.
Okay. Next question from Mike. So in order to build the dimensional accounting for a client, does it mean we'd need to purchase all the modules you mentioned? And the answer to that is no. It really depends on the circumstances of the customer. If you need to keep a track of your dimensions in terms of data entry, you need to speed that up. If you need to put in additional validation and defaulting and the like, then Extender would be a good idea. If you need to budget at this dimension level as well, then you'd probably need to look at optional tables. On the reporting side, if you've already got a good BI tool, you may not need Info Explorer. And with data views, what data views is doing is it's creating these views for you within SQL. Those are SQL statements, and those you can manually code as well. So we're not suggesting that you would need to go with all 4 modules. It really does depend on the situation. We've seen companies go with all 4 and others that have only needed 1 or 2. Right, next question. And for you, what screens can we apply these dimensions to? So I think the question is around what screens can we amend so that the dimensions become columns within the grid.
Okay, so like we did for the accounts payable, we added in the course, the buyer, the course type, location, division, trainer, and region. So these are new fields in the grid, yes, but they're not new fields in Sage's data dictionary because they are, as you can see, optional fields that are attached, in this case, to the AP invoice detail. So any grid, like order entry details or shipment details, purchase order details, general ledger journal, any grid that has optional fields attached at that database level, we can take those optional fields and display them, either just display or make them editable in the associated data entry grid. So, yes, we've done it here in this particular example. We've done it on AP invoice entry, and we've done it also in the GL. So we've added those same optional fields, I believe, in the GL batch. So if we go to the right, we only added course and buyer. And possibly that's because when you choose the course, it'll default the others and the buyer's independent. But yeah, so any grid, any place where you have optional fields at that transaction level, we could join them into the grid, either all or select ones. And also, if you are using optional fields on the header, so in this case, if you had optional fields on the journal header, or maybe I should go back to my AP invoice to show that, we can, if they're critical ones, we could move the optional field or copy or have a duplicate of the optional field on the screen as well. So sometimes on like a purchase order or something, or an order, you might have a particular status. So rather than having to come here to look at it, we could, if you've got the space, put the optional field on the main screen to make it more obvious. So either make use of the space here, make use of some space here, or in fact, replace one of the fields with the optional field if it's a critical field. So, I mean, the objective is without too many clicks, you can see all the critical information on one screen. And of course, I can drag these along and put them right beside the amount, just as Steve had done, and it remembers that by user. If you want to see course and buyer all the time, and these you don't mind, you're just going to leave them on the side, you could drag those to the extreme left or vice versa.
Next question, can we default dimension values based on user, location, or item number?
Yes, so in the example that we have here, if I add a line, let me just choose, I'll just use the same account. When we add a value for the course, and let me just show all the optional fields. So when we add a value for a course, either by keying it in or choosing it, so I'm just going to choose one of the later courses because it's got completely different values. You'll notice that when I chose C249, it's defaulted that it's MAC, it's coincidentally the same, location, GC, division, trainer, and region. So, and that came from our Extender custom table, which was keyed by course. So and we're not storing the buyer there. So Extender, you could implement any kind of rule. The rule we implemented here was read our custom table and get these values and default them. But it could have been look who's the entered by, or look who's the logged on user, because it may be different to the entered by, if somebody's amending it. And based on that user ID, do something, read a table, look up some default values. Or if, if I was in order entry and I was doing an item detail, just like, when I entered the account, if I was entering an order entry item, an IC item detail, we could have some default values based on the item or based on the customer. So any of these rules can be defined and implemented using Extender, which all leads towards more accurate data collection and therefore more accurate reporting.
Next question, also around these customizations. Do we need to reapply our customizations when we install updates?
So neither updates nor upgrades, typically. You don't need to reapply the customizations and unless the underlying screen or view has changed. So in this case, you can see this is the standard AP invoice entry. And you might have noticed when I opened it up after the event, there was some refreshing of the grid, which it was adding those fields to. So the way Extender customizes screens, it applies the extra logic that you have after the underlying original screen opens. So we're not recompiling the original screen or affecting the original screen as such. So no matter what product updates installed, and a new one is installed, Extender only comes into effect after the screen starts opening. It's not like we need to know at the compilation time or at the creation time what version you're running or what product update you're running in that way. So the Extender customizations are imported into the database either as a script or as a module. And when you have a look at it, so here's the screen script for the AP invoice entry, and here's the screen script for the GL invoice entry, this one adding the course and the buyer, this one adding all 7 optional fields. And if you edit it, this is just text, and this text is loaded into the company database and reapplied each time the screen is opened. So it typically doesn't matter what version you're running or what product update is applied, as long as the underlying things that you're working with have not changed. Sage hasn't, in this case, deleted the grid control called AVL API-BD. So that's what Sage called the grid in the screen, and that's what we're working with. So if they renamed that grid, then yes, you would need to change your code. But that sort of level of customization, changing typically doesn't happen with Sage. They may have added a new field to the grid, but or hidden a field or changed a validation on a field, but they typically don't do such major changes like that. either in product updates or versions.
Next question in relation to data views. What happens if you do a dump and load?
So yes, data views. So let's just recap what that's doing. So in information setup, you can create info set codes, which are geared to help you create a view. So here we've got an info set code called GLDIM, and it's associated with the GL post because we wanted to flatten the optional fields from GL post O into a single view. And on the database view tab, when you click plus, it will automate that view for you. I've just got a second one here where I put some carriage returns and made it look a little neater. So you can see it's selecting everything in GL post and then left out adjoining to the optional fields. Not to say you can't do that in SQL for yourself, but as you know, what that does when you create a view, and this is my database, you end up with a SQL view here. And if we look at those columns, you can see it's all the fields in the GL post table plus the optional fields down here at the bottom. So that SQL view, not to be confused with the Sage view, does not get included in a dump and a load. What a dump and a load does is it looks at all the modules that you've got activated, what views they have, which are associated with one or more tables, and it dumps out the data, only that data that it knows about in views. If you've created an extender table because you've got an associated view ID, it will dump that data out and reload that in a new database, just like it does any core table. But for the actual script of the view, oh, sorry, I didn't actually finish. So once you've done that, as long as you've got a database connection, once you've done that, you've got to click Create View. If you change it or if you add a new optional field, you drop the view, regenerate this, and then go Create View again. So this text of the view is stored in the database. So it will dump and load. So once you dump your database, load it into a new server or a new version for testing, all you need to do is make sure your database connection is still valid or change it to the new one and then click Create View and it will create it again for you. So yes, your views won't survive a dump and load, but you can recreate on the other side.
Next question, moving on to Info Explorer now. Can we use Info Explorer on other systems?
Yes, you can. So by other systems, I think you're meaning other databases. So I'll just open up that cube, the actual versus budget that Steve showed in the demonstration. So when you have a cube, really it is linked to, if you look at the properties of the cube, it's linked to a connection. All our sample cubes on our website are linked to SQL Server and linked to a Sage 300 database, and that's what they're geared on. But there's nothing stopping you creating a new cube using one of the database drivers we support and linking through to any database and doing a query and ending up with a cube on that. And you probably know that through queries, you can join data from multiple tables, so multiple databases. So a good example that we've done lots of examples of is combining Sage CRM with Sage 300. So you might want to get your opportunities and number of cases out of Sage CRM or other critical data that you're storing in Sage CRM associated with your customers, and combine it with the sales history that's in your Sage 300. So you would just have, in one database, you'd have a view to the other database, linking the data together. Your connection would be through to the primary database, and then you could combine in Sage CRM data in this particular example, or any other database that you've got a logical connection that you want to combine and report on across databases. Our sample cubes, for those of you who are not aware, if you have Info Explorer installed and look at the click on download sample cubes, it goes to our website where we have some 50 sample cubes loaded up, grouped together by module. So depending on the module that you're interested in, there's a number of sample cubes. You just go ahead, click on one, download it, change the connection where I showed you, change the connection to your own database, your own SQL credentials, and click refresh.
While you're on the website, Anne, one of the questions here is how do you best suggest we get going in terms of training and get up to speed with these modules?
So if you go to the Sage add-ons by module, and let's look at optional tables, and this is true for all our modules here. The first part of the page on the module is features, benefits, some screenshots if you need those to send to a customer. And then down towards the bottom, we'll always have the brochure. We'll have a demo video or maybe a couple of demo videos if there's a number of features in the module that are quite distinct and we demonstrate them separately. And then we will have a training video. So this will normally be about an hour long, and it'll go through every single option in the module. For some of them, we have quick start videos, so it shows you how to quickly get going with the module. So it might not go through every option, but just goes through the key steps of setting up a module. And here, for example, we've got a optional tables training. So that's everything around optional tables, but here's just a shorter training just on the Excel add-in. And here's a demo, budgeting and forecasting together. So this will be on both optional tables and on Info Explorer and how they can both be used together. So you can work that way. And that will give you the key videos associated with a particular module. But if you also use our search, and then once you get the search results, you could filter by video or training guide. So if we searched on optional tables, we've got all the webinars we've done or training guides, knowledge base, well, not knowledge base articles, but blogs or something. And then if I wanted to see, well, what are all just the videos associated with it, then we could filter that way. And here's all the different videos, most of them with, an index to show you where to start. If you just wanted to see how do we save, how do we use write back, you could start there at minute 1340.
Another more technical question, Anne. What is the difference between optional tables and extended tables?
Good question. So when you create an extended table, and I'll just go and look at the course table as an example, you can add as many fields as you want. The data types need to be the official data types that the Sage database drivers recognize, because we're using the Sage database drivers to read and write from this particular table. It generates you a view ID, so any third-party developer, external developer need not address the table directly. They just need to address the VI table, the VI view that you get generated. And the table name, the Sage dictionary gets updated with these fields in that Sage dictionary under that name, so that if you wrote a Crystal report on it in Company 1, you could still run the report in Company 2 without having to change your database links, because it's recognized by the Sage report object because it's in the dictionary. So, these tables are completely free format, and we have a default table editor, which allows you to edit that data. So insert and delete and modify. But as you can see, the fields are just placed down in a long list in our custom table editor. Yes, you can import the data into this, but if you're using the table editor, the default one, It's just, a vanilla screen. It knows enough to, that if you've said it's a date, it'll give you a date picker. If you've said it's a lookup to another table, it would give you a finder on the other table. It knows enough about that, but you can't group them together, put them side by side. You'd need to create your own screen based on that. So yes, we have samples of screens, and you can modify that and to create your own screens to make it more sophisticated, to group them together differently, to put them down side by side, and so on. But this works very well for a flat screen like this, and is not, and you don't have to do any coding to get a table like this up and running. But if you've got a more sophisticated table like a header and a detail, so sets of tables joined together, you would have to do the screen yourself. And for budgets, that's exactly what it is. So if we look at our transaction entry, and we look at this particular data entry, and I'll find one of these course budgets. So here's our, for our course fees, here's the our budgeted revenue for course C002. Yes, this one's only one value because our courses run on one day only. But if this was a budget, GL account and optional field, and you had a monthly budget, you would see the data coming down here as rows. Yes, you can import into this as well. But a lot of the heartache of creating a header detail type of screen is done for you. So, and we have the Excel add-in that you saw previously, which allows you to update this info set straight from Excel without having to massage it into a standard, the data into a standard sort of file import for Sage. So for all those reasons, because we have this information entry screen like in a grid, because we have the import already, or the Excel add-in update without having to massage the import, if it's budget information, I think it would save you time storing it in this table, in these tables. If it's completely new data, not really associated, not a header detail around budgets, then I would create an extender table.
Great, thank you. The next question revolves around the licensing, and the question is, how does the licensing work? Now, the licensing does differ slightly for the 4 modules that we went through. Info Explorer is on a per seat basis, and there are 2 versions of Info Explorer. There's the standard one, which is really allowing you to analyze data. And we then have the write back version, which is good for budgeting, where you can enter budgets and write those budgets back into Sage. Data views, extender, and optional tables all work as standard modules, just as Sage does. So you would purchase one of those per site. The only difference is extender, if you are using the workflow capabilities, which we haven't shown at all today. But if you were, you would then need to purchase workflow users, which are on a named user basis. Anything to add to that, Anne?
No, just to reiterate, just to create tables and store extra information using extender or apply validation rules and so on, you don't need workflow users. You only need workflow users if part of your customization is to have workflow templates and to create workflow instances when information is changed or records are created. And then you need workflow users only for those users who need access to the console or the Workflow Anywhere app or the remote action service to actually approve or reject the workflow instances.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're pretty much out of time, so I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for attending the session today, and please keep an eye out for next month's session. We'll be sending you the details of what that's going to be and when it'll be shortly.
Thanks for your time, and chat to you next month. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.